Okay, are we ready to crack on? Can you see my screen? Is it being shared?
Yep, it is. Yep, looks great.
Okay, excellent. Right. Okay, so thank you for being in the room, everybody that is here. This is a bit of a whistle-stop tour, really, of the UK BIM framework and where we're moving on from the BIM Level 2 to the UK BIM framework. Because there are some differences within this and some things that people really need to kind of understand. Now, to begin with and kick things off, we're just going to have a very quick sort of introduction to BIM Level 2 and what that is. So BIM, for those of you that don't know, it is building information modelling. It's a process. It's not a thing. It's not something physical that we can touch. And essentially, it is just a better way, a more efficient way of managing construction and operations information using digital technologies and processes. Now, in 2011, if you weren't already aware, this was mandated by the UK government on all centrally procured projects using BIM Level 2 to define the maturity required to deliver correctly structured asset data. So quite a long time ago, that was mandated. How it was defined was through a set of standards and public specifications. So a publicly available specification is what PAS stands for. And there were some British standards as well, all in the series of the 1192. And it was part 2, really, that laid out the fundamental principles of BIM Level 2 and the associated standards during the project delivery phase. So this is just some pages from within that standard that say these are the sorts of things that you need to do in order to deliver BIM Level 2. And these are the standards and processes that you need to comply with in order to be a BIM Level 2 project during the project or capital delivery phase of a project. And as you can see here, that actually consisted of a number of standards. It wasn't just the 1192 suite of standards, but within those standards or specifications, they then referenced all of these other standards as well. So technically speaking, a BIM Level 2 project is quite a big animal, which not many people or projects have really grasped technically to the T. But anyway, moving on from that, it was defined within that 1192 Part 2 specification. There is this image here, which I'm sure many people have seen before. This is the BIM maturity wedge, or the Bew-Richards wedge, named after the people that delivered it. And this was designed to show a high-level understanding of what is required to achieve each of the 4 maturity levels, whether it's level 0, 1, 2, or 3. And this included the modelling and data management processes such as 2D CAD and drawings of lines, moving on to 3D models, how you share those models in a common data environment, who's producing those models, are they being federated, and then the level 2, the elephant in the room, which has never really grown in terms of a definition. That was sort of the future, and this wedge was defining that, and the standards are below the line here of which you would need to comply with in order to be at any given level of maturity. How is it supposed to be implemented, or how was it supposed to be implemented? Well, it all started with the client. This is one of the things that cannot happen without the client beginning the process. So they would need to define what they want. It's not something that you can just simply ask for. You can't just say, I want my project to be BIM Level 2, because nobody would actually know what is expected to be delivered at the end of the project. And this just adds a massive layer of ambiguity. So the client would need to start a project by issuing what asset information they require, how they want that information delivered through the employer's information requirements, assess their supply chain, implement the BIM protocol, and that should be part of the tendering process going out to their supply chain. The supply chain would then respond to that tender with a pre-contract BIM execution plan explaining how they're going to deliver those information requirements, and a project implementation plan, which essentially is a assessment summary of their supply chain, demonstrating how their suppliers are going to actually deliver the information that is required. That then moves on when the appointment is made. So we would start then with the client appointment. They would then reissue their asset information requirements, employers information requirements, the protocol, and establish a common data environment for sharing amongst their team during project delivery. The supply chain would then respond again to that, having been appointed, with a more detailed post-contract BIM execution plan. This would include information about the information deliverables, the master information delivery plan, to what level of detail they're going to be delivering the information in, and with the information protocol throughout their supply chain. And all of that information should be managed and shared, structured within a common data environment, which should have been obviously implemented by the client. Now, in many aspects or many projects, particularly with a design and build scenario, this would have been a response from the main contractor, with their supply chain providing information to how they're going to help the contractor to deliver the information that is required. How's it been implemented within Kent? I mean, I don't know how much sort of engagement or interaction we're having on these sessions within the main stage. By all means, you can jump in and ask questions throughout the whole sort of presentation. And if this is something that you've maybe implemented some of within Kent, or you've seen some of it implemented, then by all means, please let us know. From our point of view, from what we're seeing, it's been a bit of a mixed bag, really. Quite often, the most important piece of the puzzle is missing, and in that respect, it can be the client requirements, although we are starting to see a bit of a change in this area. But client requirements are often misunderstood, not only by the people receiving those requirements, but also quite often by the people writing them themselves. And we see that just when we see employees' requirements on a project saying you must deliver BIM level 2 with not much else information included. Like I said earlier, it's not something you can just ask for without putting your own bit of effort into it as well. Or you must deliver COBE. COBE stands for Construction to Operations Building Information Exchange. It's a structured format, a structured asset register, defining all of the information that you require from your built assets after they've been installed. This can't really be generated without the engagement from the FM team. So that second point there, many times when we talk to client organisations, they don't know who the FM team is going to be. If they do, the FM team don't seem to really want that engagement from a BIM point of view. So there's still a lot more cohesion needed from the client organisations. But like I say, we are starting to see this change somewhat with the people that we're talking to. So I am confident that things are going to start moving relatively quickly in Kent and the regions. Moving on to the designers. So we have various different design teams involved on a project, whether they're architects, structural engineers, MEP engineers, or specialist designers. Where are they? From what we see, again, if you are part of one of these organisations, feel free to shout up and tell me what you're doing. But many have begun their journey into using object-enabled software. This is a terminology used for BIM tools. So obviously be aware that things like Revit are not the only tools available for modelling in BIM. You've also got other things like ArchiCAD or Vectorworks and many other softwares, but these object-enabled tools, a lot of the designers are using. The majority, though, of these designers are still primarily concentrating on geometry, creating nice models with nice objects that look like they should do and they fit together nicely. And they're using these models to do some coordination exercises with other designers, which is great. And this is where we do need to start. But what we do need to start doing now from there onwards is concentrate a little bit more on the data that is associated to that geometry, because essentially it's the data, the digital information of those projects, which needs to be fed into the operational phase of that built asset in order for the client to gain maximum value out of what they're asking for from a BIM point of view. And that understanding from the data part also then leads on to the understanding of the classification and the COBE delivery, which are obviously parts of those data. So again, we are seeing change. Some of the designers we're working with at the moment are starting to understand the benefits of classifying their objects in a standardized format, making it much easier to find information as and when required. That then moves on to contractors. So again, we're talking about those that are within Kent. Again, there's a mixed bag. There's differing levels of advancement. So some are a little bit further on down their journey than others. Many that are not quite on their journey yet, when we talk to these people, there's they're waiting for clients. Quite often we hear them say, our client is not requesting BIM, they don't require BIM, so we're not going to do it. And I think that's really more of a misunderstanding on the contractor's point of view, whereby you don't need the client to need BIM for you to get benefits out of it. If you're procuring your projects using BIM, then you're going to get your own benefits, your own efficiencies, and you're going to save money yourselves. When the client wants it, it will just be that little bit easier. So you know, with that in mind, quite often it is seen as a bit of a tick box exercise. So sometimes if you do get the loose requirement where you must do BIM, then just to tick the box, people will say, well, we'll deliver BIM, but without any real requirement, what exactly are you delivering? And then moving on to the supply chain, many subcontractors in MEP are still working in a 2D world. Steel fabricators, on the other hand, have been doing this for years. Quite often they're using Tekla software, which is a 3D modeling software which manages data anyway. So actually they're in a really good space. Most suppliers, though, do have a little understanding. As you move through the supply chain and then into the facilities management world, you do find that the level of uptake does slow down. So towards that end of the supply chain, we're really starting to try and gear them up and get them on board. So there's still a long way to go. That's not saying that Kent is any further behind than any other region within the UK, because they're not. This is across the board. Even the huge projects up in London and the cities, major cities of the UK, yes, they are implementing BIM to an extent. No, it is not integrated throughout the entire supply chain. So there's still a long way to go for our whole industry, but generally speaking, we are all in a pretty good space. So that's your sort of your BIM level 2 and where we are and how we're implementing that in Kent. And now I'm just going to sort of turn that on its head a little bit and start talking about the UK BIM framework and what that is. So I don't know whether you've heard of the UK BIM framework or not. It is mostly a voluntary group effort from the British Standards Institute, the Centre of Digital Built Britain, and the UK BIM Alliance. And rather than defining BIM maturity, they provide actually very valuable resources to the industry, which can help people on their digital journey, specifically aligned to the new international set of BIM standards. Now, this framework in itself, it supersedes the terminology for BIM level 0, 1, 2, and 3, as we just spoke about, as do the international standards, very much supersede the previously discussed set of PAS specifications. So just about everything I've just said to you so far this afternoon has now been superseded. So forget it. It doesn't mean anything, or not really, don't actually forget it. It's still relevant, it still does make sense, and that's what this afternoon is about, is to just show you what has happened now that we're transitioning into that UK BIM framework. So from a maturity point of view, we're not saying that the previous wedge has completely disappeared, although you're not going to see it like this in this form anymore. There is still a BIM maturity journey to go. So this image is out of ISO 19650 Part 1, and it is basically the wedge, but in a square. So it's no longer a wedge. We now have stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, rather than level 1, 2, and 3. Level 0 or stage 0 has completely been dropped, so that's no longer a thing. The standards layer, technology layer, and information layer were always there in the wedge. They're just depicted slightly differently in this diagram. But then we do have this addition of the business layer here, which is essentially saying, as your maturity grows throughout BIM from stage 1 to 3, the business benefits that you can expect to achieve, regardless as to what part you play within a BIM project, your business layer, your business benefits will also increase as your maturity increases. So the maturity matrix is still there, it's just slightly different. So BSEN ISO 19650, this is now the suite of international BIM standards, with the first 2 parts already 2 years old. And these standards, like I say, are superseding the previous standards that we've had for building information modeling. And it's actually really important to understand this, because Part 1, 2018, supersedes BS 1192, 2007. This standard has now been withdrawn. It's no longer current, and you can no longer ask for it to be complied for on a new project. If you're already working in a project where this is a requirement, then obviously you need to continue working towards that standard, but no new project should specify any of these withdrawn standards. This, incidentally, was the standard relating to sharing information in a common data environment and following a specific naming convention whereby all information is shared and named in the same structure, and also a coordination effort to make sure the same coordinate system was applied. It's not a like-for-like document, but it is specifically superseded by Part 1 of ISO 19650. Part 2 of 19650 supersedes PAS 1192 Part 2. So that document I showed you in the previous slides, which set out the fundamental principles to BIM Level 2, has now been withdrawn. You cannot now ask for this specification to be used in a new project, because it's no longer current. This is directly superseded by Part 2 of ISO 19650. It's generally geared towards the same thing, although this new document is much better, and it is laid out in a much better format to actually assist people in delivering BIM, rather than just setting out what you must do and must not do. This has considerations within it. It's a much better structured document. So PAS 1192, the most well-known one, is now withdrawn. Now, more recently, so those two were introduced 2 years ago, and I am still quite surprised that we are still seeing requirements from clients come through the door asking to comply with PAS 1192 Part 2, which just shows a bit of a misunderstanding. For 2 years now, it's actually been a withdrawn document. This one here was released this year. This is Part 3 of ISO 19650, and it supersedes Part 3 of the PAS 1192 document. So this is the document that explains BIM through the operational phase of assets, whereas the past two were the delivery phase of assets. This is the operational phase, and PAS 1192 Part 3 is now withdrawn. We can't specify that anymore. And then the last one of the most recently released ISO 19650 standards is Part 5. And again, it supersedes PAS 1192 Part 5. So this is the standard which describes a security-minded approach to information management. And again, the PAS document is superseded. So like I say, these superseded documents, they cannot be used now on new tenders, as they have been officially withdrawn. And likewise, the terminology surrounding BIM Level 1, BIM Level 2 should be avoided, as it's no longer a recognised terminology. The 19650 series is simply now the framework to which BIM is to be implemented within the UK. So clients would be basically specifying that they would like BIM to be developed in accordance with the ISO 19650 standards, or in accordance to the UK BIM framework, and then they would need to implement the various parts of those standards in order to define their requirements. So BIM Level 2 standards, which do remain current. So as you saw in the previous slide towards the beginning of the presentation, when they were defined in PAS 1192, there's a whole host of standards and specifications, which we haven't covered just in that previous slide. And many of them are still current, many of them also at the discretion of the appointing party, which is new terminology, which means the client. But these are, or some of these are still current. So BS 1192 Part 4, which is this British standard, which defines how COBie is to be implemented on projects. That remains current, though there is an ISO in development. It will be the next 19650 document. It will most likely be Part 4, and it will supersede this document as well. What that actually looks like at the moment, I couldn't tell you. There's nothing out there that explains whether COBie will be maintained as a British standard or whether a different structure will be used. But that remains to be seen. But it will be superseded at some point. PAS 1192 Part 6, which is your health and safety CDM regulation document within a BIM environment, how you capture your health and safety information digitally and include it in your data handover. No plans to develop an ISO from this document as yet. So this remains current and will remain current for the foreseeable future. BS 8536 Parts 1 and 2. 1 is for buildings, 2 is for infrastructure. These are the government soft landings standards, which define how information should be used for a soft landing handover over a 3-year period. Again, no plans as yet to develop this into an ISO, so this will remain a current British standard now and for the foreseeable future. But again, like the other standards, it is something that needs to be implemented by the client. The 8541 series, Parts 1 to 6, which define how object libraries should be named and grouped and information associated to them. The plans for this set of standards are to be superseded by the ISO 22014 and 22057 standards, which are currently under development and when they've been revised, they will likely supersede BS 8541 series, which will then be removed. And then all the other standards referenced within the initial BIM Level 2 suite of standards in that PAS 1192 Part 2, there's loads of them. You've got the 55,000 series to do with facilities management, 12,006, which is based on your classification schemas. So Uniclass 2015 is the UK classification that we should be using. 16354, the guidance for object libraries, and 16739, your industry foundation classes schema, the open BIM format. These are all very much current and will continue to be so into the future. So I think really what we need to understand from the UK BIM framework is the PAS documents we've all been used to. Most of them have now been withdrawn. The rest are likely to be withdrawn within the next 1 or 2 years. It's not likely this is ever going to change again in the future, because I appreciate everybody starting to sort of get used to this BIM Level 2 thing, and now it's changing and it's BIM framework. It's not likely to change again because it's now gone from publicly available specifications to an international standard, which will then just continue to be updated as time goes by. So the UK BIM framework is definitely what we need to be following at the moment. So what does it all mean? If you are currently set up to deliver your part of a BIM Level 2 project, not much has changed. The fundamental principles of better information management remain the same. My clicker's bust. Hold on. Apologies. There we go. Yes, if you're already set up on a BIM Level 2 project, not a lot has changed. You continue as you are. The fundamental principles are the same. Terminology changes. There's been quite a lot of terminology changes between the PAS documents and the international standard. And this is primarily to suit the international stage. Obviously, when you start translating terminology into other languages around the world, sometimes it doesn't mean the same as it does in English. So things like clients, we're talking about parties and teams rather than client and contractor. Information containers rather than models. We talk about appointments rather than contracts. Employees information requirements are now exchange information requirements, which is quite confusing because essentially it's exactly the same document, but it's exchange instead of employers. So the acronym remains the same, you'll be pleased to know. Geometrical and non-geometrical replace graphical and non-graphical. Level of information need replaces level of detail. So we won't be talking about level of detail anymore. It's more that the need for information from the client or the appointing party. Project information requirements have replaced plain language questions, functions instead of roles. There are some other terminology changes out there. We won't go through all of them now due to lack of time, but generally speaking, there's quite a few terminology changes in there that you would need to understand. There is an addition of a risk register and a mobilisation plan, which weren't previously part of the BIM Level 2 delivery. So risk registers are pretty standard on construction projects. It's just been included now in the process within BIM, and a mobilisation plan is a plan that describes to your client how you're going to deliver their information, and it's been tried and tested so that it's going to work from the outset. It's not something that you're going to figure out halfway through the project, as is what happens quite often nowadays, and it doesn't work. The new ISO 19650 set of standards, they focus on the scale and complexity of the project, which is one of my favourite parts of the changes of these standards, is that there was quite a lot of ambiguity out of there. Is BIM just for new build, or does it suit refurbishment projects as well? In my head, it suits everything. And the key bit here is that you focus on the complexity and the scale of the project so that you will shape your BIM requirements around that project. It's not going to be, you're not going to get reams and reams of paper describing what you need to do on a £10 million refurbishment project in your house, for example. So it's that's a really good part of it. It's fit for purpose. Maturity levels are now stages and layers, as we saw in the previous slide. And then obviously the worst one for everybody is that these standards are not free, whereas the previous BIM Level 2 suite of specifications, because they were publicly available, you didn't have to pay for them. Now these are international standards. Unfortunately, there is a fee you need to pay, and you can get them from the British Standards Institute website. If you're a member, you get them half price, so it's almost worth the 200 odd quid it is to become a member to get them at half price. Clients still need to define their requirements, and nothing's changed in this aspect. Okay, like I've said at the very beginning, BIM only works if the client knows what they want, so that remains exactly the same. The organisational information requirements from a client that describe what their organisation need to get from their information. That informs the asset information requirements, the data that is required about the assets installed in a project to inform the operational phase. The project information requirements, as I said, the plain language questions, often misunderstood and left out of a BIM project. These essentially are the questions that need to be answered by the information given by the supply chain, and your exchange information requirements, how it's going to be delivered. So you can see this, this is a diagram again from the new ISO documents. Your OIR contributes to the project information requirements, those plain language questions. It encapsulates the asset information requirements, what we need to know about the assets. Both of those contribute to the exchange information requirements, which then drives the project information model and then through into handover to the asset information model. So in that respect, nothing's really changed from BIM Level 2 to the UK BIM framework. It's more of a terminology change than anything else. So what are the next steps? Well, we've got the message remains the same as I've been banding on about for many years now, and I'm sure a lot of you at KCFG have heard it all before, particularly in my 3-minute presentation, although I've left Donald Trump out of this one, judging by his little argument with his rival the other day. That was quite amusing. I should have put him in. The message remains the same. Our industry is wasteful, it's inefficient, and it's riddled with mistakes. We continue to apply the same processes and procedures we always have, whilst telling ourselves that we are as good as we can be. We continue to find excuses for resisting change, but the fact is that the future is digital, and that means our industry needs to digitize in order to maintain a competitive edge. It's not going away. If you don't change, you will be left behind. So we've got our little friend here with his head stuck in the sand. Unfortunately, there's still many people out there in that scenario. It takes time to adapt. You cannot achieve it overnight. We are seeing change. We're seeing change within local authorities. We're seeing change within private developers and housing developers. It's definitely coming. I know I've been saying that for years, but I'm telling you, it's definitely coming, and it will be here very, very soon. The clock is ticking. We do need to start getting engaged and start on that journey, because it takes time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. You need to train and educate your workforce. You need to do things in a different way. You may need to deploy new technology, but obviously depending on your business model depends on what you need to do. And then I think finally, really on these next steps bit with the recent activities within the country, apparently there's some nasty bug going around, and this recent pandemic that we are all faced with, the continued uncertainty of our future, which it is, and it's raising a lot of questions about how not only us as a construction industry, but other industries are going to operate. The need to change is actually greater than it ever has been before. I've been banging on about this before COVID happened, and actually now it's becoming even more important that we all digitise our lives as well as our workforce and our workplace. Digital construction techniques have meant that personnel numbers on site can be reduced to maintain social distancing measures. Design, coordination, program management, other back office tasks are completed from the comfort of people's own homes, and meetings are held on digital platforms. And this is the norm for us at the moment. All of our training goes out online just like this. All of our coordination meetings are done like this. And I'm starting to wonder now, why did we ever bother going to site in the first place? Because it's just getting easier and easier the more we do it. Clients are recognising the need to change and the need to develop and understand their own digital requirements. Now, we are currently engaged with 2 local authorities, 3 contractors, 1 structural engineering company, 3 architects and 1 MEP consultant in Kent, and then many others in the surrounding regions. So a lot is happening. People are getting on board. They're developing their requirements. They're getting on their learning curve. I think the message on that respect is, in order to survive, we must move forwards and don't be an ostrich. And that gets to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, we've got about 45 seconds, I think. That's not bad timing, is it, Chella?
You are awesome, Matt Samway. I tell you what, there is, honestly, I don't know how you do it. How can you do it to the minute? I don't know.
Prosecco. Prosecco.
Prosecco?
Nah. practice, I guess. But yeah, any
that
questions?
is fantastic. Thank you so much. Has anyone got any questions? Let me see.
Time, great. If not, by all means, fire them across an email. I'll get back to people.
Okay, someone has said it is easy to convert to an immersed VR aspect to understand the BIM models, problems and difficult situations better by seeing it full scale in person. You know what a technophobe I am, Matt. That will mean nothing to me. Does that mean anything to you? Is it just a statement? Oh,
one of these?
What are you showing?
That's your VR headset.
Oh, VR headset. Oh, VR. Oh,
Put it on, Matt.
Virtual reality. Put it on.
Yeah.
I won't be able to see anything.
Now walk around.
It's very easy to visualize your projects through one of those.
Yeah, you're right. You are right. Well done. Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for speaking,
No problem.
as always.
Okay, if anyone's got any other questions, by all means, get in touch. I don't know if you've got 5 seconds, leave that on there, and there's our contact details.
Thank you, Matt. Can you just pop them in the chat room, in the chat thing as well?
Will do. Yeah. Okay,
Perfect.
great. Thank you very much, everybody.